I just had a little water break, we've had a little breakfast this morning, so I'm thinking about food and beverages. Let's talk about when you go into a restaurant. When was the last time that you ordered the daily special? I want you to think about that. So often, when I go into a restaurant, the daily special is kind of mentioned to me in like a mumble. Well, you've got a cream of tomato bisque soup with some lobster in it, salad somewhere on it. I don't know. Now, this doesn't make me want to buy it. You know, so you kind of hear it and you say, okay, great, let me look at the real food on the menu. The problem is, the special is something the restaurant wants to promote. They want people to know about this type of stuff. So when I hear that mumble, I usually think my impression is that the person has not tasted the special, or they don't like it. Now, neither one probably is very pleasing for the owner of the establishment. So it's important, if a chef spent all this time creating a nice little meal that can help the restaurant out, that has to be communicated down through the organization. And people have to buy into it. Because often I find when you buy that daily special, it's described to you in such a way that your mouth starts to water. And you can see a picture of it in your head. And you can see yourself cleaning your plate. All these things add up in someone's mind. The same thing can apply to your businesses. You want to make sure that you're giving them a vision of the future. If you're planning an event, you're not just putting on a party. If you're putting on a wedding, you're putting on the event that people are going to remember for years. You're going to put on that event so that the organizer can fully enjoy it because you have all the details covered. You can see in how you pitch your special can have a huge impact on how people are looking to buy from you. It's just one of those little changes that can get you around some of those obstacles in terms of how do you differentiate yourself from your customers. When I did weather, I had already been in television news for a few years. And then one day I was asked very simply, do you want to do weather? And I thought, oh, that sounds fun. So I said, okay. Now, I did not know much about meteorology or anything like that, but I studied their books and stuff. You can learn and you get maps and everything. But the hardest thing for me was learning how to present the weather on the air. Because you guys may or may not know this. When you see the weather forecaster, the map is not behind him or her. It's either a lime green, like your bags, that color, or a blue. The image of the map is electronically put in the control room, so it's on special effects. Not quite James Cameron, but early stuff. So, as a weather forecaster, you have a few things you can use to cheat, because you don't really see the map behind you. You have a monitor on one side here, monitor on one side there, and then a monitor that's right on the camera. So over time and with practice, you start to learn that, oh, okay, out here is Arizona, here is California, let's move over to the plains, here's Florida, high pressure moving in, all that stuff. You learn how to sell the image. Well, one thing I learned, a tip, because at first I was just kind of like, okay, there's some cold air over there. Someone said, Ken, here's a trick. Wherever you look, wherever you point, you need to also look. So if I'm looking up at New York City, I'm pointing up that way. If I'm going down to Atlanta, I'm there. Down in Texas, you're keeping that connectivity. What this does is it helps sell the image to the viewer. It clarifies the situation. Now, how do we bring this all to you? In your organization, in your business, are you clearly pointing your staff, your customers, towards your goals? Or are you just kind of saying, well, we kind of want to have some good sales and maybe do some good stuff and get some stuff up? Or are you saying 20% more sales this year, I want to have 100% repeat customers, and I want to bring in a new customer every month? You have goals. Make sure that everything you are doing is pointing people in the direction of those goals. Now, I'm going to tell one story, and then I'm going to open the floor up for some questions. So if you have a question, feel free to yell it out, or you can step up to the mic, talk through there. Then I'm going to end with a final story, because I kind of want to end on a certain note. So let me tell this story about the people who have helped us along the way. How many of us have had someone who championed us, maybe at an earlier age, maybe right now? How many people have someone who have made a difference in your career? Raise your hand. I think there are so many people in our lives who can inspire us. And maybe when we're facing those moments where there's a challenge, and we don't know how you're going to get through it, that person, remembering them, can help a lot. So I'm going to tell you a story about a woman called Tilly Weiss. Tilly Weiss grew up in Russia and was born during the 1880s. She was born in Russia, she was Jewish, and at that time it was not a good thing to be Jewish in Russia. A lot of discrimination. So her and her family decided that the best thing for them was to leave Russia and go to the land of opportunity, America. Only they didn't have enough money for everyone to take that trip. So it was decided that Tilly Weiss, who was 13 at the time, would be the first to take that trip. So Tilly Weiss boarded a big cargo ocean liner, went to Ellis Island. Didn't speak a word of English, but she knew if you go around New York City, you will eventually find people who speak the same language you do. So she did. She was able to find a place to stay. At 13, she was able to get a job as a seamstress. Over time, Tilly Weiss is able to raise enough money to bring the rest of her family to America, to safety, to a future. And Tilly Weiss continues to live in America. And eventually she meets a man. They marry. They have a daughter. Everything is going perfectly. But then sometimes life gives you a surprise. It turns out the man had been married before. He thought his wife had died in an accident. But it turns out she didn't. And one day she showed up. She'd been in the hospital for years. She'd been trying to find her husband. She found her. So Tilly Weiss's husband said, I can't believe I'm in this situation, but I have to go back to my first wife. So Tilly Weiss became a single mom decades before that term was ever known. Tilly Weiss kept going. And eventually she met a man, another widower. The wife was definitely gone. Who had children of his own. So they created a blended family years before the Brady Bunch. Now speaking of the Brady Bunch on TV, let me flash you forward a few years. Tilly Weiss is watching television with her granddaughter. On TV is a show you probably have heard of, Mr. Ed. For those of you who may not know it, it deals with a horse who can talk. TV was a little different back then. We didn't have Snooki, but we had talking horses. Okay, so she's watching this program. Tilly Weiss believes that the horse can talk. Now I have to tell you something. Tilly Weiss had seen a lot of change in her life. It took longer for her to go in that boat from Russia to America than it took for Neil Armstrong to go from Earth to the moon. She had seen airplanes take off, cars get big, cars get smaller, dresses move up and down. So for her, seeing a horse that could talk was just the latest thing. But her granddaughter said, Grandma, it's a trick. They put peanut butter on the horse's mouth to make the lips move. That's all it is. But she said, no, horses can talk now. Isn't that wonderful? Now, there's something else I should tell you about this story. Tilly Weiss, she is my great-grandmother. And the granddaughter in that story is my mother. And I think about that story, about all those challenges she faced, all those hard times, whenever I am facing some of those opportunities where maybe I feel like it's not worth it, I can't do it, I'm going to give up. I think back to that person, that 13-year-old, who went on such an adventure, who kept having to face challenges, who kept having to clear the path of some of those problems. She kept moving on. And then I think, with people like that behind me, how can I fail? I got to meet Tilly Weiss. I was about 10. She died when she was about 100. And she was a little out of it, but still I could appreciate who she was. If you have one of those figures who's a mentor or a supporter, take a moment every once in a while and thank them. And of course, consider inspiring that person who's coming behind you. We all stand on one another's shoulders from some time or another. And I encourage you to do the same.